It was on there before. Yeah, there we go.
No, 4 years. USB-C.
Are you sure? Oh, it's gone off again.
Yeah, this is good. The next generation.
Have you considered reframing everything?
Dan, if this goes wrong, I might have to get you to go and sort it out, because I don't know.
It looks like it's working.
Okay.
It is. I trim it.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hello. Okay, so today I'm going to pronounce this correctly. Today we have Effie Le Moignan.
Well done.
From the University of Lincoln, and I will let her introduce herself. 20 minutes as usual, and then 5 to 10 minutes afterwards for questions. I'll let you start.
Lovely. So I'm going to talk a little bit about visualising the family. So I look mostly at Instagram, but to sort of make sense of how children are represented on Instagram, we have to go back and do a tiny potted history of how children got represented in paintings. Now these are deliberately ugly babies, and there's a reason these are ugly babies. Like, they have male pattern baldness because these are homunculus babies. So does anyone know what homunculus is?
Perfectly formed tiny human.
Yes, little man, literally. So they're Jesus babies. So that's because the church basically commissioned all paintings because they were really expensive. So all the ugly babies with like male pattern baldness, little withered old men, they're all Jesus, even if they're not supposed to be Jesus. So it's basically, it'll always be Madonna and it'll always be Jesus, which sounds a bit odd, but it becomes really important later why the homunculus ugly babies are really important. So they're basically expressionists, and all the paintings are basically saying, you folks are my flock, and the church is the establishment, and we're all joined, basically. So that's what the paintings did. So there we go, it's a homunculus baby! Isn't it awful? So it's a holy baby and it's got its cross. So basically all the paintings up to sort of medieval time look like homunculus babies, and they're great. So then, at the turn of realism, we get a little bit less homunculus, basically. People have a bit more money, so they start to go, we want paintings of our family. But when you want your baby in a painting, you don't want it to look like a homunculus baby, because it's fugly, basically. So the babies start to look a little bit less holy and a little bit more like cherubs, which is also quite important. So we're like cute and we're innocent and we're chubby, but this one still kind of has a halo and shit going on. And then we go through to like the European ones, which are basically, I'm not sure what it's technically called, but it's the pale and interesting phase, when all the children look like that, like they might have been dug up like a couple of hours ago and paid especially light, but they are all very, very pale and interesting. So then, you go a bit further forward, and this lady is the founder of the Sunday school movement. And here we go, children are not innocent beings, they have a corrupt nature and evil dispositions. So there we go. So what's really important about this is there's basically two camps at this point. You can have Apollonian, as in the children of Zeus, which it's a theory that says that children are tender and lovely, and there's all sorts of sort of horticultural terms about nurturing your children and growing them like little trees. And then there's the other one, of which she's clearly not in that camp. She's in the children are feral and evil and like sinful, and they must be crushed. You must break their spirits, essentially, is what this camp says, to turn them into good moral human beings. So here we go, the other ones. We're angelic, this is important. We're innocent, we're lovely, and our parents will love us and think we are the best thing in the world, which is really important. So here we go. So here we have like happy families. So we're all innocent, we've got our little bonnets and our chubby cheeks. And you go forward to the 19th century, and okay, they're grim farmers, but you can see that we've already got a trope of how we show families. So we've got Dad, and it's very patriarchal, and I am in charge. And Mum looks into the middle distance, like, oh, isn't he wonderful? He's looking after us. And then you've got these little cherubs, even if they're a bit grubby and a bit tatty if you're poor, essentially. But we've already got a trope of how we will show families as a unit. Because once you can represent your family away from the church, if you've got the means, suddenly it changes. If they're not homunculus children and they're not holy, you are saying, we as a family are a unit. And you are saying we are cohesive, we are blended, we are happy, and we are saying to the world, these are my folks, this is my tribe, basically. And you want to show the world that your tribe is not only a tribe, it's the best tribe. So, we still have tropes. Yes, I was looking for the worst, clearly. But the trope stands, because layout-wise and composition and framing, they're actually very similar. And if I swapped our lovely folks on the left for a modern one, yes, there'd be fewer mullets, but the layout would be essentially the same. And again, it's a cherubic baby. I mean, I don't know what's going on with this kid. Constipated, I don't know. Little Trump. It's not orange enough to be baby Trump, I'm afraid. And some more. Here we go. Cherubic children. We are. I mean, Dad does look stoned, doesn't he? Let's be honest. He doesn't look patriarchal, he looks stoned. But again, here's Dad, this is my family. She's like, yeah, he's so wonderful, this is my family. Where am I? And the little mullet kid is just like, yeah, I'm doing as I'm told, so they don't feel like it. So, the thing about family photography then, is if you take these tropes, is it's just the same. Your family photos are not documentary. Even if you're recording it just in a photo album for you, you're saying, this is my family, we're complete, we're happy, and we are not dysfunctional. We're not dysfunctional in any way. We're not going to get divorced. We're not going to show if someone gets ill. We're not going to show if Daddy's an alcoholic. It's all going to be beautiful. We're going to be, what Bourdieu says, is essentially seasonal conformists. So we're going to have Christmas and birthdays, and everyone's photo album is going to have Christmas and birthdays. Quite boring, and they're quite repetitive. So while the camera doesn't lie, by omission, yes it does. It's only going to show what we want the world to see, and what we want to remember, essentially. We don't want to remember the Christmas where everything went wrong and the power went off and Grandad drank a bottle of whiskey and, spouted racist things. That's not what we want to remember. So it's not necessarily worth 1,000 words. It really depends which 1,000 words we're going to pick on. If they're happy 1,000 words, yes, by all means. Because childhood itself is a social construct. And we've now taken to the lovely Apollonian version where the children must be nurtured. And we are separate from the church, we are separate from the state. Our family unit is our tribe. And that is how we've idealised it. We want the world to see we are ideal. So when we had physical family albums, very often it fell to mothers to curate them. Fathers didn't very often sit down, and that's because essentially it's a form of emotional labour, which has always been conceived as really gendered. So essentially, Dad might take them, because that was the gadget and I am capturing my tribe, I am enacting patriarchy, but Mum gets to stick them down, basically, and make them look nice, because that's the curation and that's her role. So even up to the invention of the internet, that was still true, and it's still true now, research says. Even people who still have them, still print them out, it's still mostly women. The only exception is teenagers, who are permitted within their own spaces to curate their own beginnings of their tribe, which starts with friends and eventually will evolve to their own families. So, this kind of what my work started out as, which was oversharing by parents, which is quite problematic. And can anyone think why it might be problematic?
Privacy of the children.
It's a slightly more fundamental issue. Can anyone think why, as a term, it might be problematic? It's because it doesn't exist. So what I may post, I may think that's a-okay. But if Lawson goes and posts something, I might think, do you know what? That won't do. He should know better at his age, and he's a professor. That's oversharing. I don't want to know what he ate for breakfast. You know, I don't want to know. It's really boring. The same with parents. People accuse them of oversharing. So it might be that I don't want to see 7 posts a day of whether your baby has filled a nappy. I ought to warn you, if you are of a squeamish disposition, you might not want to look at the next slide because it has got poo on it. So, there's been lots in the media about oversharing, but fundamentally it's a subjective judgment on behalf of an audience, and not just an audience as a body, but individually, because something I might show, you might go, well, what's the problem with that? But it can be as much as, the photo's kind of boring of your children, but that's okay once a week. Once a day, maybe not so much. Maybe if you've got 500 friends on Facebook and they all have a baby, that's a lot of baby pictures, even if they're being restrained to once a day, because that's 500 pictures of babies and they all look the same. Let's be honest. So oversharing is really problematic for parents, and it can be quite a snide way of us to start to enact social norms on social media. Because it's so new, we haven't really become, as a society level, about what we think is roughly the benchmark of being appropriate about what you share about your children, whether that's in terms of privacy, frequency, content, what you do with it, whether you spam every social network you belong to with the same picture. There isn't an established social norm because we basically haven't worked it out. We've got teething problems. So it's, oh no, it's not the poo slide yet. So this is the whole bunch of headlines that people have come out with. So we've got sharenting, which is a really strange one, where we've made a hybrid term. We've got Facebook's motherhood challenge makes me want to punch my computer screen. I was so embarrassed I cried, writing the Insta mummy, and suing your parents because they put your entire family album online. You might not want everybody to know what you looked like in the bath, or, you know, with a bucket on your head or whatever. But I think we are coming out to the infamous poo slide, so if you are sensitive, I'm afraid it does have a large turd on it. Okay, so this comes to the Shut the Fuck Up Parents blog, which essentially people on Facebook submitted images that they just couldn't get over, and she actually made this into a GIF. Obviously the original did not have any covering, so it is just inescapably a giant poo. But it is not only a giant poo, but he's proud. Hashtag turd, hashtag shit, daddy's girl. Because the mind boggles that you might go, I'm not only going to take a picture of this, I'm going to send it to Facebook, I'm going to hashtag it, and I'm going to be proud of this. I'm owning it. So, there was so much content that got submitted. The lady who ran this blog started adding captions, and she does anonymise them, but this did cause a little bit of a stir, because naturally, some of the people who originally posted these saw them on there. And they were outraged, because I put these in public, and then the public looked at them, and they judged them. And the problem here is they judged them harshly. Frankly, whether it was deserved or not, is again a subjective judgment. They clearly thought this was fine and it was funny and their friends would appreciate this, but at least one of their friends didn't. So that friend deemed this oversharing on a mega scale. And presumably there are other photos, and this kid is going to inherit a lovely digital identity complete with her giant turd. So that's going to be lovely for her, isn't it? Because, again, most of parenting isn't rocket science. This is the thing, people share it, but it's quite mundane. There are milestone moments, and there are moments that parents will deem to be very cute. And from the outside, when I was coding a data set, you can tell that they're supposed to be cute. That doesn't mean you think they're cute, but you can see where the idea is, and it's tropes again. It's a baby with porridge down its face. It's playing in the garden. It's things that would be, if your parents have photo albums, you're in there and you're doing that. But you didn't have to have this lurking for all eternity, even if it gets deleted. Which is where people get really concerned, for whatever reason, that perhaps in working this out, there are problems. So this is one of my favourites. This is entitled Sean's Sandwich. And this was submitted, and every day, Sean would make a sandwich, Mummy would let him, and then Mummy would document the sandwich on Facebook, and it was termed Sod Sandwich of the Day. So Sean made many concoctions over many months. This is just selected highlights. And someone was just sent this in with about 50 of these, like I don't ever want to see another sandwich that this kid has made. She thinks he's Einstein. Yeah, I mean, these people seem to be taking it in good humour, but it's funny. When you let these things loose on the internet, net humour is quite, as we know, unforgiving in many ways. And some of them have crossed lines. I don't know how many of you would be familiar with I Can Count to Potato or Are You a Wizard? Which were both somewhat troublesome memes involving images of children, one which had Down syndrome and was entitled I Can Count to Potato. And the family did discover this, but they discovered this sort of 15 years after the original image had been uploaded. And they discovered first-hand the stray sound effect because it had gone around the internet a dozen times since then and died a death. And you could no longer recognise the grown-up version of the child as relevant to the picture when you put them side by side. Except Mummy made such a fuss and went to the BBC that she inadvertently linked exactly what her child looks like now all grown up with the long dead meme, resurrected it when the internet had long forgotten, and was naturally outraged and offended until somebody said to her, but you posted this publicly. And she said, yes, but that doesn't give you the right to laugh at it. Which is a really difficult argument, because then we cross into things like free speech. But in the middle is a minor, a legal minor with no say whether Mummy wants to share his sandwiches with the world, because the sandwiches are relatively harmless. The poo is, yes, it is what it is, I think, is the kindest way. But there are problems with children who have been adopted, who are fostered. There is actually a very small piece of legislation to actually protect adopted children, because they've had so many problems with children who have been taken in a closed adoption, which is when the parents are not informed where the child has been adopted. They're not allowed contact, they're not allowed to look for them, except they've got Facebook. And it's not difficult if you're very determined to trawl and trawl and trawl and find your adopted children and essentially harass the people who have adopted them. So there is a little piece of legislation they had to write especially for that, to essentially be able to slap down people who are looking for their unwillingly adopted offspring. So there are really dark sides to it, as well as Sean's many sandwiches. So, critics hate family photos with a passion. This is some of the nicer, more polite things that have been said about them. But the crux is, they're very, very, very boring. they're all the same. Because they are. People look at albums and they're tropes. They're all the same. There's nothing bad, we're all happy, everything's great, kids are cute. So, they are boring in the sense that they're trying to express cute. But, the problem is cute within context claps. So, what I can do, what I've been doing, is taking two theories, which is intensive mothering, which is essentially is mothering as a verb. You enact mothering by doing. It's an activity. You aren't a parent, you do parenting. And if you cross that with Goffman's performative identity, you essentially get, I am performing mothering as a verb publicly so that people will think, we still are the perfect unit and I am a competent, capable parent. My family's happy, I am good, I can do my mothering job. So, the trick comes by how you extract that information from pictures. So, does anyone have, what could you say? Someone extrapolate something for me from one of those pictures. Just tell me something. What can you tell? What's this mother saying when she takes this picture?
Teaching my kid about cooking.
Yeah, so I'm teaching my kid. I'm doing mothering. I'm doing an activity. I am mothering verb. What else can we say? What's she saying if she's saying, I am teaching my kid? She's saying, I'm well resourced. She's saying, I'm probably middle class. She's saying, I'm not common, I'm doing a good job, essentially. She's making a statement about class. She's making a statement about her parenting. And she's making a statement that I am involved, I am doing. This kid's not feral, I'm not chucked him in the garden in a pram and shut the door on it. I'm doing, and here's me doing, we're happy. So on the left, what can we say we're doing? What have we done to that picture for a start? Okay, so can that happen by accident? No. So you have to have gone through your photo feed, you have to have chosen that particular picture, you have to have gone to the effort to put the filter, you have to go to the effort to save it, to choose to keep that one. Why would you do it?
It's cute.
No, what else? What are we saying?
I can use filters.
Actually, yes, that is one of the things we are saying. We are saying, I'm competent, I'm a good parent, I'm an up-to-date parent, I am contemporary, I am modern, I am doing parenting in the most modern way possible. So, which is where Instagram's great. Because on Instagram, I can look for particular hashtags, which I have done and made a profile of where you pull out parental hashtags. That's great. Or you can go and look at the pictures like we just did. You can code them, or you can look at them, look at them individually. You can go and look at the feeds in sequence and start to see how many pictures a parent posts that are showing I am doing parenting and how many are this is me as an individual. So that's great. We can do all sorts of really good things. But it's got all the way full circle back to analog photography. Does anyone know what this thing on the left is?
Is that a little printer or something?
It is a little printer. It is actually one of these. And this is a HP Sprocket. This is their newest thing. They've gone back and decided HP can't make money out of photo printers because people aren't really printing their photos that much. So the thing to do is to make them small, make them cute, make them Bluetooth for your smartphone, small enough to carry around with your smartphone in your hand, make the little pictures that come out with sticky backs and magnetic, and suddenly we're all the way back to, look, we can stick our cute kids on the fridge, we can put them inside birthday cards. So we've gone all the way back round from digital into now people are going to try to leverage how much parents love cute pictures, all the way back to, look, we can print them. So it goes all the way full circle as a disruptive technology which hasn't essentially changed what the parents are doing, picture-wise, so we have to leverage something different commercially. Does So it's all quite clever. Does anyone know what that style's called on the right? That's quite niche, but someone might know. Lomography. Anyone heard of that? Okay, lots of people don't research lomography, and the honest reason is because they're so litigation happy. You only have to put the word in. It's fine. But again, it's going back to analogue. So essentially the message is that family photos haven't changed, but they'll go all full circle, and the wheel has not been reinvented by the internet. Families do the same thing, and will probably go full circle to having pictures stuck on our fridge. So that's it's as simple as it goes, in a whistle-stop tour from homunculus ugly babies all the way through to the HP sprocket in 20 minutes. So there you go.
Okay, guys, I'm aware that we did start quite late, so we just have one quick question before we wrap up. Yes, Shauna.
I was just you sort of saying like it's not changed these practices, and I agree with that in terms of the way you display, literally being a good parent. But do you not think that something shifted alongside that? So, for example, I've noticed these quite interesting. I won't put judgment value on it. Interesting behaviours among mothers, which is things such as like 3 weeks postpartum, here's my body, getting fit, eating clean, breastfeeding mother, or like in the pregnancy, this kind of idea of actually sharing far fewer pictures of their children, but very much trying to show themselves as an independent mother who's going to get fit and healthy in a slightly obsessive, scary way.
Yes, there
which,
are.
So
yes.
the construct of motherhood maybe, as opposed to the way you display parenthood, but there seems to be something that's shifted there, I think, which I think has been influenced by the social media.
Yeah, there are loci of focus. If you dig down, I mean, I just didn't have time. If you dig down into the data, there are subgroups, and some are fitness, clean freak, healthy eating. There are definite kind of, awful as it sounds, without value judgment, hippie mums who will be very much eco-sustainable. You know, we've got unbleached nappies. There are subgroups, but there, in a sense, have always been subgroups. So yes, it has. You're absolutely right. So yes and no.
Yeah, cool, great.
Okay, Cara, did you want to quickly say yours?
Just quickly. No, I thought it was interesting how you drew from visual history to sort of construct your analytical approach. There is a really rich tradition of photographers and artists who actively counter that sort of dominant narrative that you presented, and kind of history of photography is full of such an example, even of sort of self-taught photographers and mothers who portrayed the family in radically different ways from the examples that you
Oh, absolutely,
brought.
yeah.
So I wonder how that sort of counterculture, if you like, or whether you took it into account in any way when even collecting data or analyzing the ways in which people actively decide to portray themselves, or deconstruct ways in which others portray them.
That's actually a brilliant question. Yes. The problem is with social media is the omission. So again, we can only sort of see what's there. So we can look at value judgments about people who are trying to be, for example, more artistic, more avant-garde. Very often they're not necessarily using the mainstream social networks. They again tend to find more niches. You tend, as far as I can see, I mean I don't by any means claim to be an expert on that particular niche, but I think you would tend to find those on slightly more specialist places. There are some tumblers that are quite personalised. Places like DeviantArt do have some, but again.
But I'm wondering, no, I'm not looking at the specialist. I was not wondering about the specialist group. I was more looking at the vernacular, so the everyday mother, whose aim at sharing photographs is specifically to deconstruct what seems to be the only way in which mothers are portraying themselves and their babies. So actually, I was wondering whether did you find diversity in that sort of self-represent? You haven't.
The thing with the traditional tags of things like motherhood is they are very generic. They are very, very generic. There's very little self-reflection and there's very little obvious deliberate attempt to sort of dismantle any
then
role
in
or
your
trope.
data, I mean, have you sort of looked at, have you analyzed these photographs and have you sort of discussed them with the person who shared it, or is this all you sort of looking at?
No, I
Yeah,
deliberately went and looked at naturalistic data because all the studies
Right.
that I started with had spoken to parents, and that's a
You have.
perfectly legitimate approach as a body of work.
Mm.
But if you've only spoken to participants, then you can't judge if you're being reflected back a repetition of holes in the method. So you are essentially asking parents to be incredibly self-reflective in a role that can be very vulnerable and they can be quite defensive about because nobody wants to be called a bad parent. So we have to be very careful in studies of parenting to phrase things carefully because the minute you mention things like privacy, you are essentially making people potentially defensive because there is an implied value judgment. Because people are,
Well, it depends how the
Yeah.
question is constructed,
Yeah.
right?
but again, words like privacy
But yeah.
are really, they're kind of hypersensitive within this context
Right.
because it is minors, it is people's children. So it's quite difficult, and it's quite difficult to assess whether, for example, new mothers, how reflective are they on their online practice? Is it an